Okay, great. Welcome everybody to episode 7 of HR in Your PJs. I'm Rosie, Community Manager at the Happiness Index. Before we kick off, I just had one question for everybody. We are on our 7th episode, and as you know, this is called HR in Your PJs, but we were wondering what you all thought of the name and if there was any suggestions that you might have if we should change it or keep it. Feel free to share your feedback in the group chat and let me know. But I will let Mark and Kran kick off with their introductions. Kran, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, hi, I'm Kran. I work for Freeda Media. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of us yet. We're quite new. We opened our office in September last year. So it's quite sad to see it's been closed for so long now because we spent a lot of money and effort trying to get it ready. It's very Freeda, sort of very on brand, spent lots of time making sure it looks a certain way, just so our employees felt like they could use the office to film digital content, which is what we do. So we live on Instagram and Facebook only here in the UK. We also have an office in Italy and Spain. They've been running for a little bit longer than we have. And yeah, so we create very inspiring female-led stories to inspire the younger generation. So mainly focusing on Gen Z and millennials. So there's a lot of in-house production going on. We've got a studio and everything set up to do all of that.
Thanks. Mark?
Hi everyone, I'm Mark Barnicoat. I'm the MD of Oasis HR Group. So we do a couple of things. My day job is running our recruitment business. So we focus on mid to senior level HR hiring. And that's been around for 16 years. And the other half of what I do is focused on our HR think tank series network. So we run, or did run prior to coronavirus, about 25 face-to-face HR events each year. And this is actually our 11th year of doing so. Obviously, given everything that's happened, we've moved our events into this sort of setting as well. And Matt has been involved with some of our think tanks virtually and has come to some of the events physically. So that's the world that I work in, everything sort of HR related. So pleased to be on one of your Zoom calls. And I did point out to Matt that his room looks far too perfect for a garden shed. I thought it was a superimposed background, but apparently it's not.
I can prove it there.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, lovely to meet everyone. And yeah, I think, happy to sort of share some of our experiences of what our network have been saying and yeah, give some insight where I can.
Yeah, so I'm, thanks Mark and Kran, I'm Matt Phelan. I'm the self-appointed head of global happiness and a co-founder of a business called the Happiness Index. Before I jump into questions with Mark and Kran, I always like to kick off with some data. So most of you saw the data probably about 10 days ago that showed again that happiness had dropped. So happiness across companies using our free product Employee Voice 24/7. So happiness had dropped from about 7.6 to 5.8. So it's quite a substantial drop. But one of the interesting things that's come out and changed since then, and this is just an early look at it, is that one of the first things that happened is feedback and the amount employees were communicating had trebled. Which we talked about from a neuroscience perspective yesterday, so we're trying to understand that. And that's actually started to drop this week, so it's not a treble this week. And we believe, and I had to just, because it's the first time I'd heard this phrase, but from a neuroscience perspective, we believe it's what's called an emotional deficit, where all of a sudden, people couldn't see their family, their friends, their colleagues, etc., etc. Hello, Heidi's little one. So it's a term I hadn't thought of before, but emotional deficit. So we believe it trebled because all of a sudden everyone had a deficit where they couldn't see their families, their friends, their colleagues. So their need to communicate with their company was far increased. So I think it's a useful term for people to think about, and to think about, do their employees have an emotional deficit, and how can you help with that? So I just want to share that a bit before we jump into it. So Mark, tell it. I mean, recruitment. I imagine it's a tough place to be at the moment, but just give us a bit of background on what's going on in recruitment at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, obviously our world is primarily focused in on HR itself, but the people that we work with, talk to, have in our network will be responsible for hiring across all of the sort of professional blue and white collar sectors. But I think that, you know, the general sense is the first few weeks for most businesses, it was, you know, hit the pause button and take stock of what measures businesses need to roll out. There are some obvious you know, emissions to that statement, namely, you know, public sector, NHS. I spoke to Pepsi last week. You know, businesses in the food manufacturing retail sector obviously had to really ramp up lots of their hiring temp-wise in particular. But I think, you know, our sort of day-to-day world of HR hiring is really significantly dropped. So I was saying just before we jumped on this that there's probably sort of 10 to 15% of the number of vacancies in HR that we would typically see. I think it is picking up. You know, we get alerts every day of sort of what's happening hiring wise in the HR world, and it does seem to be sort of by drips or drabs creeping up. There are some people hiring within HR, but yeah, obviously it's very suppressed at this moment. And our sort of take on it is that initially, at least, it will be much more fixed-term contract and interim focused versus permanent hiring, where a permanent need does exist. Businesses like Johnson & Johnson, who I spoke to last week as well, are trying to redeploy their internal staff, you know, internal mobility versus hiring externally for permanent.
Mark, before we go to Kran, like I've seen you in action as a leader a few times now, and you definitely strike me as a modern leader. One of my friends was they just joined Amex last week, and I just asked her what the onboarding was like. And she said one of the best things is the CEO held an all-company town hall where he admitted he didn't have all the answers to everything.
Yeah.
What's it been like for you as an MD and leading your business in these times on a personal level?
It's actually been really empowering for me, because I think that it's enabled me to reinforce my leadership style, which is to be open, to be transparent, to share updates even if I don't know all the answers. And you know, people appreciate that and they get it if you can have that level of authenticity and openness. You know, I have spoken to people in our network and explained the difficult choices that we've had to make in terms of furloughing some of our team and some of the other measures. And again, I think it's not just about having that authenticity internally, it's about externally as well. You know, I'm a real human being. Everyone in our network is a real human being. They face all of their own challenges. And I think to sort of cover it up or sweep it under the carpet and pretend that some of the difficult things that are happening aren't happening is just very disingenuous. So yeah, it's been, obviously I would rather not have had to make some of the choices that I've had to make in terms of furloughing team members. But again, the key measure is to make sure that as a business we can survive and then ultimately thrive when things start to pick back up again. So protecting the business, everyone gets when you explain it in an open way.
Yeah, thanks Mark. And Kran, how's your business? What's the update from your end at the moment?
Recruitment definitely got a big pause quite early on when we heard about the COVID coming along, and we were scaling up quite quickly. So I mean, in September we were 2 employees, and I guess a few weeks ago we were about 39 employees. So we scaled up quite quickly, and we were just about to hire the next 10, and we were ready to offer. We went through the entire process, and literally the day before we offered, we decided to press the pause button because we were no longer in denial, and we sort of knew something was coming. And now we did offer a few roles just before that. So we had 2 people start over the last couple of weeks, which was interesting because I was like, how am I going to do their onboarding? Yeah. But you know, it was okay. I'd been in contact with them following up to the first day anyway, just to make sure they felt comfortable coming into the business and they knew exactly what was going on. Some of them we had to have difficult conversations with about pay before they got there, because we actually had to make some company-wide changes quite quickly. And I think it was fine. We have these all company meetings every Monday, which happened to be the day they started. So they managed to have, an hour with me, an hour with their teams, and then going straight into the company meeting where our MD is completely transparent and honest about everything that's going on. So not great, but we're definitely looking at phase 2 and what we need to do to make the business survive long term, not just short term now.
Yeah, and how's it been for you personally, Kran? Same question as for you as to Mark.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I haven't really felt too much pressure of it so far, because we only had to furlough 2 people, or we only could. The thing about digital media is that we navigated the new virtual world really, really quickly and started doing virtual content with our talent within a week of being in isolation. So that was great to see that the teams could do that. What that's meant is our content levels have continued at the rate they are, which is quite a lot to do from home. So our teams are really, really busy. But now we're talking about phase 2. I think it's going to become a lot harder from a HR position, especially being there from the start, to see that we're going to have to make some strong business decisions to make sure we can get there and thrive, like Mark said, towards the end of the year next year.
And Kran, one of the things that we asked you to come on to talk today was around tweaking internal comms for different cultures, because you're across different countries as well.
Yeah.
Could you just talk us through what you mean by that?
Yeah, so for us, we have 3 different markets. Now, because coronavirus hit each market at a very different time, so Italy is one of our markets and our biggest market, and they were obviously in isolation really, really quickly before we'd even accepted that it was going to come to the UK. Spain had then followed a few weeks later, and then we'd followed not too far after Spain. So we have kept communication independent to the local markets, because I think that was really, really important at the beginning, and just because of the timescales and the different MDs wanted to lead it slightly differently. And of course, the isolation means very different things for us in the UK than it does to Spain and Italy. So our experience is totally, totally different. And us having the luxury of going for a walk is just something they couldn't even imagine. Although they can go for short walks from Monday. So they can finally see the outdoors again, which is nice for them. So comms have been completely local, but what we've had to do is spend even more time communicating, which I'm sure we all have, using Zoom and using Slack and whatever. People are really tired and fatigued of using screens all the time. Yeah. It's hard to get away from, because I don't know how else you would communicate. People have started doing phone calls instead. They're trying to revert back to revert back to the things where you can't see each other. But we've been keeping in contact. So we have our all hands meetings, which is an all company meeting. We do a fun thing that we call the fika meetings on Thursdays, which is just the whole team to talk about anything. So an object they like, something they miss from home, or every week has a different theme. So it really connects the teams on a personal level. Yes. And then obviously letters and different check-ins. So before employee voice was something that we looked into, it was really important for me to spend a lot of time with each individual. And because we're such a small company, it's easy to do that. So I was having check-ins with every individual for the first couple of weeks, just to see how they are and how they're coping and what their challenges are, so I can get an idea. And now we've introduced employee voice, which is amazing, because it gives me that data without me having to spend all my days talking to people on virtual calls. But also allows them to be a little bit more honest than they're really probably going to want to be with HR directly about how they're feeling at different points in the day and stuff. So lots of different touch points. We're trying to do all company quizzes. We did a scavenger hunt with the management team yesterday, which went down quite well. However, as fun as these things are, it's just more virtual time you're spending outside of working hours. So it's tough.
Mark, just to bring you in on that point there around honesty of your teams, you're obviously an open person, and I imagine most people would tell you what they're thinking, but across going back to what Kran was saying there and the data that shows the slide in happiness, if you're asking most employees at the moment, they say, "Oh yeah, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine," and then you look at the data, and it's a very different picture. Have you got any tips on how you can get? My only tip is I just ask someone 7 times so they give me the right answer, which I don't think is a very good tip. Have you got any tips on how you get people to really tell you how they're feeling?
I mean, that's the age-old question, isn't it? I've got 3 children, and sometimes I wish they would tell me openly and honestly what they're feeling, rather than just say, "Yeah, I'm fine," and have a sort of semi-stroppy, sort of almost teenage moment about it. But I think some of the things that Kran just talked about there really sort of resonated with me, and overall, it's just sort of real curiosity to find out what was happening. And doing that by, you know, surveys and talking to people and Slack and all sorts of different ways. And I think that, you know, all too often we presuppose or, you know, think we know what's happening for people, and actually we don't. And it's really difficult to get to that point without being face to face, you know, the old sort of in the pub having a drink or whatever, where people sort of a bit more open. But I think it's just about reaching out and connecting as often as possible in as many different ways as possible. So, you know, I smiled, Kran, when you said about people getting screen fatigue and reverting back to a phone call. I literally had one of those this morning. But that was just because technology let me down and my internet was playing up. But we had a phone call, and actually it was, you know, quite nice because we weren't distracted by sort of looking at one another. We were just literally intent on listening to what each other were talking about. And so I think there's something in that, you know, it's just intently listening and trying to pick up the clues of what people are saying. You know, if there's too soon, yeah, everything's fine, and change of subject. Well, you know, do you need to dig a little bit deeper there? Is there something else that is bothering that person? And how do you get there? By asking different questions. But I think it's a really good point, Matt, and I don't quite know that I've got the answer, but, you know, the emotional deficit point you touched upon right at the outset, I totally get that. You know, people are going to be, as are all of us, separated from their families, their friends, unable to go and do the things that they previously took for granted. And I found that, yeah, all of my work over the last 2 weeks has really been reaching out to our community, so our clients, our candidates, our think tank community, our team, our board, our main sort of suppliers, and just asking the question, you know, what's happening in your world? And there seems to be a huge eagerness to sort of pass the time of day a bit more than perhaps we were 6 weeks ago. You know, people sort of miss that little bit of daily interaction and chit chat. So I guess not just cutting to the chase all the time, but spending some time finding out, you know, what's happening in your world personally rather than just business is also key.
Yeah, and for anyone interested in that emotional deficit bit, we've got a webinar, which I can't remember when it is, and Caroline will kill me for not being able to remember, on an update on the change curve. Around those different emotions and understanding where people are in that before trying to jump ahead and assume that everyone's at the same stage in what we've got, which is currently an enforced change. Mark, in terms of recruitment and business, I'll just make up a scenario for the future for you to work from. But let's say we, either forced or not forced, it is much more of a virtual world in the future, and there's less. There's less face-to-face, well, not face-to-face, but person-to-person. I'm trying to think of the right phrase for it. Physical face-to-face type stuff. The one that I always remember is we interviewed a guy and asked him what his perfect job was, and it was like anywhere I could work on a laptop, anywhere around the world. And it sort of changed the way I thought about recruitment, because actually, yeah, if I want to get this developer over Google or Facebook, the thing that he wants from me is for him not to be office-based, which is pretty easy for me to give. But do you see recruitment changing and adapting from this?
Yeah, I really do, actually. It's a great question. And I think at risk of being the eternal optimist, I think there's lots of silver linings to what's happening. I think, you know, the obvious ones like enforcing businesses to work from home. One of the team was chatting to a head of HR from HSBC, and she was saying, you know, she'd been trying for years to get their call centre to be based remotely and work from home and make the business case for it. You know, it took coronavirus lockdown to actually get that moving, and within 2 weeks, they had, literally thousands of call center operatives working from home. They ordered a load of computers, and it was all up and running. And you think about not just the business and cost savings of that, i.e. not having to have a massive, office for them to be based in, but also the personal time it saves individuals by not having to commute to work. I think that, flexible working, work from home has been on the agenda for a good few years. But it was only 6 months ago I hosted an event at RBS on that topic where they were struggling with it. Well, you can guarantee if you go into Bishopsgate today, there would be no one in the office bar security staff. So I think that there are some real silver linings on that front. I think in terms of, to your point of assessing talent, I think there's definitely something within HR. How do you assess what great looks like? And it's a problem we face all the time, because there's an element of subjectiveness, an element of fit. That person could fit in our organisation as a HR business partner or a HR director or whatever it is. But I think actually by kind of removing some of that subjectiveness, by not meeting people face to face, maybe there's an opportunity to bring some more objective criteria into assessing what great looks like. And so maybe some reliance more on psychometric testing or behavioural assessment, looking at the kind of values of an individual versus just sort of how they come across in a face-to-face interview. I think it really does sort of bring back to the point, well, when we assess talent, how do we do it and what's our process? Because I think lots of businesses are just subjective. I like that person, I'll hire them. Yeah.
And Mark, I suppose I'm going to ask you the same question I asked about your team as candidates, which is how do you get out of them what they really want from a work environment? Because on a few sessions where we've been discussing this, people have been saying things like, oh, my staff can work from home whenever they want. But then when you actually look at the data, it's like they can, but they feel like they also still need to be in the office. Have you got any tips for us on potentially how to get out of a candidate what they really want versus what they want to tell you to get the job?
I'm not sure I've got the elixir or the perfect answer on that, but I'll tell you one thing is that, with the people that we've unfortunately had to furlough, we've obviously kept in regular contact with them. And I think when you have unfortunately been enforced into, a furlough situation, or it's voluntary, but you are furloughed, it makes you realise what you miss about work. And I think, my approach as a leader has always been to look at how you empower your team to do their best work rather than enforce them and mandate and dictate by endless KPIs and measures of this is what great looks like. And so if I can get someone to, take ownership of it themselves rather than me as a manager having to, jolly them along every day, it makes a huge difference. So I think it's just about, we went sort of both feet into flexible working about 2.5 years ago, and we did lots of consultations at the time, we did lots of consultations afterwards, and it got to a half decent point. But I think there's definitely a point to pick up on when we're back in a sort of normal environment, whenever that happens, to talk about how flexible working felt when it was enforced upon us to work from home 5 days a week, and what, if anything, do we want to change about how we move our business forward? Because theoretically, we could ditch our London office, which is quite expensive, and work from home much more. Maybe we do a WeWork and we have a day a week where we all come together as a team and have a bit more of a kind of social interaction physically. But I think it does open up the question of how do you, as a leader, use this unfortunate coronavirus scenario to make some changes to your business longer term.
Yeah. And Mark, just anyone else there that wants to watch something on Mark's point around the work from home and virtual work, and I've just had to Google it. If those that haven't, it's a TED talk by someone called Steve Shirley. But Steve Shirley, his real name is actually Dame Stephanie Shirley. She came over on the Kindertransport out of Nazi Germany and launched one of the most successful businesses of all time in the UK, which she sold for hundreds of millions. And it was a complete virtual business. She called herself Steve because no one would take a meeting with her if she called her by her real name, Stephanie. But it's an incredible story because the whole business was built virtually. in the 60s, 70s and 80s. It was, she instigated employee ownership, so the employees owned the business, and many of them became millionaires when it was sold. But there's an amazing TED talk on it. So following up Mark's point, if you check that out, it's Dame Stephanie Shirley. Kran, I just want to go back to one of your points around the different MDs you've got. Because it's quite funny. Well, I shouldn't say it's funny because it's crazy times, isn't it? But it's quite interesting watching Nicola Sturgeon and whoever's doing it for the Conservatives doing the updates. And they seem to be like, we just call them both MDs for the argument of this, they're both trying to beat each other to the announcement and say slightly different things. Working with different MDs and different approaches, how has that worked within your organisation?
The cultures are so different, and it is challenging because Italy is a very emotional place. They're very direct, but because the owners over there started the business from scratch, they're very close to it. And not once did obviously anyone think that this scenario would ever happen. And not once did the owner ever think that everyone would not be in the office at one time. So for him, it was a real struggle. It's been one hell of a journey for him to get through it. Because it's his baby, right? And then you've got an MD over here who has opened the UK office as a third office, and understands people, understands the UK very well, understands the things that really matter to people in the UK. So we have to think about mental health, and we have to think about all these additional things about employee well-being. Whereas in Italy, the culture isn't really there. So therefore, if you ask about mental health, they don't really respond. They don't know what employee well-being is to the comparison of the UK. So it's very difficult to get other markets to understand why we need to do things really quickly, or why we need to check in on employees all the time. And what it's come to now is we're trying to plan our return, whenever that is, and start to think about all those things. We've already started implementing things like the employee voice, and we've already started to have training sessions on the change curve and all those sorts of things to start prepping people. Whereas in Italy, they can't really think about that because they have no idea how their employees are feeling. So culturally, very different. So the approaches have to be very different. And I guess here it's almost a luxury because it's very easy to do. And I know my MD understands it, and we can implement all these great things. Yeah, over there they don't, which really does have a difference in, I think, and it's going to have a big difference in how each office will operate in the future. And I guess what the motivation levels will be for everybody.
Yeah. Mark, just to bring you in on that point, if you were working with an organisation similar to Kran's and you're helping them recruit, and you've got those two different sort of cultural sets in one company, do you adapt the way that you work, or is it a standard approach?
I was sort of pondering what I would do in your situation, Kran, with that scenario, and obviously, there's a big element to, you can only work with what you've got, so you can't change a culture wholesale, even if you know that it's the right thing for the business. But I suppose what do they measure? What's important to them? What do they measure? Is it financial output? Is it something else? What's success look like in their eyes?
Obviously, financial would be great.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's just the message and how you get the message across, right? Because if somebody has worked in an environment where they've seen all the positive that comes around employee well-being and training sessions and all of that, then they're going to understand it. And if you haven't done that, or you haven't seen it, then we have to take them on that journey to try and understand. Very hard to do in this moment because there's a lot of other pressures, but it's just about adapting the approach, adapting the story, just feeding them very slowly, I think is the best way to do it, is the way that I've had to try.
Because I think there's probably a really good point in there of we as sort of HR professionals are involved in the world of HR and feeling it and knowing it ourselves, know that a focus on well-being and being asked the right questions and checking in is hugely important. But if you've got, let's just stereotype here for a moment, a CFO who really only cares about, what's the number on a spreadsheet, linking those two together is always the challenge, isn't it? We know instinctively that if you've got employees who are happier, they're more fulfilled in their work, that they are likely to give more discretionary effort, which in turn leads hopefully to better output, better productivity, better profitability. But I suppose it's always thinking about how do you link that. And Matt, I mean, you're more the sort of expert in this area than I, but I guess that might be, if you're trying to sort of point out to an element of your business that doesn't necessarily get well-being or checking in a bit more, drawing those conclusions, I guess.
I always use a quote. I say it because it makes me laugh. But there's that saying, isn't there? Like, if you tell someone at no time in history when someone has told someone to calm down, has it made them calm down? And I love that quote because it's all about understanding about what state of mind someone's in. And how you adapt to it. And like Kran points out, unless you know how someone's feeling, it's going to be very difficult. And one of the things on that around employee engagement that we used to feel uncomfortable about, which we're talking about at 3 o'clock today, is that we use in our language use a lot of feeling type stuff. Going back to Mark's point, which is how are you feeling? Whereas when an academic looks at that, sometimes they think, well, that's not a very rational question to ask someone, but guess what? Human beings are not rational. So I think it just goes back to understanding where they are in the change curve and adapting to that. Helen Gribble, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Hi, Helen. Helen was a speaker last week. I just wanted to bring Helen in on a point here on this, which is I think it was the CEO of Airbnb, released a statement saying that 15% of their Airbnbs are for more than a month.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose I was thinking about Mark's point about what his future office might look like. Maybe it's more of a WeWork or something like that, but potentially it could be more of an Airbnb where the team go away and stay together for a week and then they're off for 3 weeks and all that kind of stuff. Have you got any views on how space might be used slightly different? And for those that don't know, Helen, do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
I was going to say, I don't work for Airbnb, just to say. So I work for One Fine Stay, chief people and legal officer there. One Fine Stay is private luxury hospitality and mostly focused in the large cities, but also we have a leisure contingent. If you ever get to the Caribbean again, we can help you with that. But it is, yeah, exactly. It is definitely clear that there's a lot more longer term bookings that people are looking at, maybe more from like a person working remotely for a period of time. So rather than realizing they have to be in the office all the time, they're going to take a month and go and stay in a part of Italy or a part of America or wherever it might be. So that is one thing that has been shown, as well as, of course, a domestic travel. But we do have some people that do on occasion rent our properties for offsites and this kind of thing. And I think it does give a great opportunity for that connection and being together in a different way. So, and I do think, in fact, we're thinking about it ourselves for our London office. Do we need an office, or what kind of office do we need? Do we need a desk for everybody? Can we operate in different ways? So I think that's definitely causing some different areas to be thought about.
Yeah, and I think even go back to Mark's point on the banks, the CEO of Barclays came out on it today and said, I'm not sure big offices are going to be around in the future. So even if Barclays are thinking like that, and the type of space they have. So I can't believe it. We've only got 4 minutes to go. Thanks, Helen. Kran and Mark, you can decide who goes first on this, but on a positive note, what's the one thing that you've taken out of the current situation that you want to build on and take forward into the future?
Personally or work-wise?
I'm going to make you do both now, Kran, now that you've dissected it.
Work-wise, I think when your teams are busy and they're working in the office, you don't always know if the culture is exactly where you want it to be unless you do a survey of some kind. And before this happened, we were in a little bit of doubt that we had the commitment that we wanted. And then as soon as this happened, I think within weeks, when everything flipped and everyone moved virtual and they managed to do all these great productions, we were so impressed with their commitment levels. And it was just so nice to see that people really do trust our MD. They trust us as a management team. They really understand the story that we're trying to do here, and they understand why they had to take cuts. Everything was just nice. I'm not saying it's going to be nice in the future, but I'd love to build on that more and just make sure we respect them and give them chance to take more breaks and be more flexible when we decide what that return looks like and when it's going to be, and just offer some more of what they would like rather than trying to be a little bit more in control from our end. Personally, I haven't watched much TV, to be honest. I would spend my weekends just catching up on Netflix, and in this time I've probably watched less TV than I normally would have in 6 weeks. So I'm going to continue with that.
Mark?
Thank you. Thanks for going first, Kran. You gave me a chance to think. The difficult question. I think work-wise, I've always instinctively felt that it's all about connections and doing what we do. We work in the world of recruitment. People are busy. Sometimes people don't necessarily, or you perceive they may not want to talk to you for very long. But I think in this time, what's really struck me is that actually me taking the time out to go and talk to people on a one-to-one basis or in small groups like this is so valuable and so well sort of responded to. So I think that the sort of communication piece is ever more important than it has been. So I think on a personal level, one word really, and that's balance. I think again, from the people I've spoken to, it comes across that sometimes we can be our own worst enemy. We put such high expectations on ourselves. We, want the best. We want to be delivering to the best of our ability, but it's so important that we also take time for ourselves and we take time out, do things like this, go outside and have some exercise, do some yoga or whatever it is for mindfulness. I think it's so important. And Kran, I have unfortunately watched probably more Netflix than you, although Money Heist is a great series I will recommend if you're stuck for something to watch. But yeah, I think balance is probably, again, just totally, I've had ups and downs, good days and bad days, like anyone else, but it just really strikes me how important that balance is.
Kran and Mark, you've been absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.